Greetings again, this is Jeff Roars with ExactTarget and author of Audience, Marketing in the Age of Subscribers, Fans, and Followers. We're continuing our conversation with Jay Baer and Joel Book about some of the themes from my book, and one of them we touched on in our last segment was about the organization and existing structures within marketing that are thwarting our abilities to get full value out of audiences or build proprietary audiences to the level they should be. So I want to dig in a little bit at this. Right now, and I'll ask this, can you think of any companies outside of media, entertainment, sports, who have someone in the marketing department who's in charge of audience development?
Probably not.
So the only places I've run into them are in publishing and
media.
Entertainment.
Media.
And that was one of the epiphanies that led to the book. You know, speaking on all the content marketing events and things, the big giant sell for content marketing is, hey, we're all publishers and broadcasters now. We've got instantaneous worldwide distribution. And I buy that hook, line, and sinker. I'm a big proponent of content marketing, but it misses the fact that in entertainment and publishing organizations, you also, other than the editorial side, have got an entire team devoted to either circulation or audience development. So let me just ask you that fundamental question. Do you think, just based on that kind of analogy, that you will see the rise of someone in charge of audience development in our larger marketing organizations?
I think so. I hope so. The point that you just made is rather interesting because when you talk about media or publishing, there's probably not any vertical out there that has more experience in audience development than do magazine or newspaper publishing organizations. There are very few verticals that have done a better job of creating content. However, therein lies the irony. If an organization was to be, if you were to predict which organizations, which vertical is probably going to really emerge as being the savviest organization or industry for really serving audience members, you would probably say magazine publishers and newspaper publishers. Nothing could be further from the truth, because what is different today is the migration to digital. I'll be very interested to see what Jeff Bezos is able to do, for example, at the Washington Post, having now bought that organization and now helping them migrate to really serve the needs of a consumer that is increasingly more and more comfortable with digital. On the brand side, though, I do think that is going to happen, Jeff, to answer your question specifically, because I think you're going to see more and more examples of smart, savvy brand managers that basically stand in front of their teams and say, tear down these walls. And the walls that we're speaking about are the walls that have been erected between the people running social media, the people running brand or traditional advertising, and the people running direct. Because now the smart brands have total convergence. Jay makes the analogy about the
touchpoint corral.
The touchpoint corral, where the smart brands understand that consumers engage with them not through one but through multiple channels. And the smart brands are now realizing that if we're really going to differentiate ourselves in our industry, we need to get fundamentally better about feeding into those touchpoint jet streams.
And Jay, those silos existed because we had to build them, right? Because the channels came around one by one.
Right.
So it's a natural outcropping. Right. Now that the dust is settling on the channels, do you feel like Joel does, that the walls coming down is kind of a natural part of the evolution? Or do you feel that it really is going to be a lot more work than that?
I think I share Joel's sentiments, and that I hope that is the next iteration. I have my doubts in the short term because so much emphasis is still being placed on audience development at the channel level. How many email subscribers do we have? How many Facebook likes do we have? How many Twitter followers do we have? How many YouTube subscribers do we have? How many Instagram followers do we have? How many Pinterest subscribers do we have, etc. And that connectivity, which is really what audience is all about, is very much thought of at the channel or technology level today in most organizations. There's no question that it shouldn't be thought of that way. You should be looking at it in terms of A, total connections for the brand, and B, average number of connections per person. You are much better off if you subscribe to me in email, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. That's much better than if you just subscribe to me in email.
Right.
And smart companies ought to be thinking about audience horizontally like that, and have a director that can really take that horizontal thinking and apply it across the enterprise. Today, though, it doesn't happen. Now, whether or not new channels, whether the dust has settled on that, remains to be seen. I think we're in a lull because we're in a very interesting point of technology transition, but give us 2 more years where the world is really mobile first, not just kind of mobile first, and I think we'll have to ramp up some other new channels and other places to gain audience, whether it's highly geocentric or other ways. So I think we'll continue to have to fight against this notion of horizontal thinking because there will always be new channels.
So I like how you describe it as horizontal because the director of audience development that I envision isn't somebody who's going to be appointed tomorrow.
Right.
I think, and I also like to break down the walls because I think there's got to be an uprising. I describe it in kind of the last section of the book that it really almost has to be an off the org chart development, right? You don't necessarily need a blessing from the CMO to get like-minded individuals who see the value of proprietary audiences talking to each other. So, email person, reach across the aisle, talk to social, talk to mobile, bring these folks together and say, what are some of the things that we can do to start getting our marketing organization thinking in an asset-based approach, a portfolio approach?
Yeah.
And one of the simple things that I suggest is just start tracking the simple growth of these different channels. So you rattled off, like 6 or 7. There are, we could throw in podcasts.
Sure.
We can throw in, I talk about primary audiences being seekers, amplifiers, and joiners. Joiners are the ones where we have a push-button relationship, but we could be tracking, the search engine traffic we're pulling in. And I just think the physical manifestation of seeing a report or a whiteboard that, much like a stock portfolio, shows me the green up arrows and the red down arrows, changes the mentality of the organization to understand, look, growth is important. And that's a piece that I don't think is communicated yet in full. I think we're very close technologically as we begin to stitch everything together, but that simple act could really change a lot of minds and get us refocused.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also going to require a shift in thinking to a new set of metrics. Because back to Jay's point, I think right now in this siloed structure that many organizations through legacy are locked into, every organization kind of judges themselves or judges success in a different way. On social media, simply accumulating hundreds of thousands of Facebook likes or Twitter followers does not a social media strategy make. It's certainly not one that's going to ring the cash register. I think if we're going to get our arms around this, Jeff, I think we really need to come up with a different set of metrics, and this is not a radical leap. There are certain channels, and Jay consults with a lot of clients in helping them make this transformation to being a true cross-channel marketer. There are certain channels that are more productive than others in terms of those that work best to attract, those that work best to engage, those that work best to retain and grow a customer. There are certain data attributes. I made the observation in the last segment that the question here is not about big data, it's more about big insight and understanding which data, which attributes are going to be more predictive of what content, for example, is going to serve this individual better, that is going to drive conversion, whether it's causing somebody to convert from being a website visitor to becoming an email subscriber, or even better, registering on your site. Which content is going to work best to drive that initial purchase, which content is going to work best to drive repeat purchase. The good news here, and you touched on it, is today's generation of marketing technology that now gives us the ability, I think, to do this at speed. We talk a lot about in journalism about the 24/7 news cycle. Today's marketing professional lives in a 24/7 marketing cycle, and speed and accuracy and the ability to be able to do this consistently, meaning delivering the right content, and then being able to measure data, customer, content, to have metrics wrapped around those things. I think that's probably going to be the way we get closer to now really being able to knock the walls down.
Your thoughts?
I agree. I think the interim step, and you're starting to see more and more organizations do this, is even just unifying the editorial calendar.
Sure.
It's to say, okay, look, email team, here's what social has planned. A social team, here's what email has planned, and really getting everybody aligned. So at least you're presenting a unified front to your audience, regardless of channel. I think that's a good first step. And then ultimately, and you and I have talked about this many times in the past, you start to think about, well, why do we have different people staffed at the channel level? I mean, why is there an email team in an organization and a social media team when, yes, there are some differences in what each channel can do for your brand? At the nucleus level, you're trying to accomplish the same things, right? And the one thing that is manifestly true for all businesses is that your customer does not care about your org chart, right? It is not their problem. So this idea, well, we've always had an email team because that came first, and then we built a social media team because that came second, is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It should be one team under one set of managers with one set of goals.
Why is that so hard? To have one set of goals so that everybody on the team knows what we're striving for.
I think most companies do have a single set of goals, but I think you have to look at.
Oh, I disagree. I disagree.
Well, let me finish the thought. Maybe I'll bring it around to where you do agree, because I think what happens is you have individual ways that the contributors are measured, and so their individual goal for social could actually be far afield from what the kind of the overall marketing objective is. Yeah. And I'll give you a perfect example, engagement. Engagement is talked about so often in social, and I see it so often in marketing press, where they're touting a great campaign and it had this much engagement on Facebook, and I'm thinking, where are the sales? Where are the other connections? And I think it's an evolutionary step to get those folks more connected to outcomes, and that's happening right now.
It is.
Out of necessity, because I think we're finally ending the us versus them wars in marketing. Email and social are not diametrically opposed. Yeah. We're now figuring out, we're aligned, we have common objectives and common goals. And as that comes together, you begin to see more of this collaboration that might have the epiphany that audience is pretty darn important. That should be one of the metrics we're measuring growth on, not just in terms of size, but engagement for visibility and value ultimately.
Yeah, I do agree with that it helicopters up to the same point. But I just still see a lot of email teams being evaluated on email-centric metrics, and social teams being evaluated on social-centric metrics.
And often campaign metrics, right?
That's
where
right.
It's like individual campaigns instead of the long run.
That's right. And people are going to emphasize the things that they are rewarded for. I mean, that's just human nature. And so we were talking about this earlier. It requires enlightened management, whether that's a director of audience development or an enlightened CMO or some other role, to say, look, I don't really care about the campaign metrics. I care about, are we building a valuable audience at the brand level?
I think that it's a leadership issue. And that's why I think the role of the CMO, you might disagree with me on this, but I think the role of the CMO is changing. I think it has to, because that CMO, as we all know, is controlling more technology investment. That CMO now absolutely has to have a full cross-channel view. He or she does not have the luxury of really being able to come and sit with the email team one day and then sit with the social team the next day and then sit with the brand advertising team the next day and have 3 separate discussions. This has to be one fluid discussion amongst all of the individuals with a shared goal in mind. If that goal happens to initially map to how are our different channels performing in terms of acquiring or attracting new consumers to our brand website, where we then have a chance to convert them. Next objective, next metric, which content is now converting better than others to really drive purchase? Which content is working better to support repurchase? What data are proving to be most valuable to really predict what offer this individual customer is going to be most predisposed to? That requires leadership. I agree with Jay, and I think if we have any hope of capitalizing on the opportunity in front of us, it's going to require CMOs that are constantly curious and are absolutely cross-channel focused and have that ability to inspire and lead their team.
And I don't disagree. I would just flip it and say, if you're a frontline person, you need to do those 2 things as well. You need to be focused on the cross-channel.
Oh, sure.
And you need to have that innovation, because I think for especially younger marketers, there's opportunity out there to innovate and to bring these groups together. And if you're waiting on senior leadership to dictate it, you're probably waiting too long.
Yep.
So
And we talked in a previous segment about Facebook's custom audiences and using your email list to advertise on Facebook. I mean, you can really cross-pollinate those tactics at the level you suggest, at the tactical operator level, right? You can be using A/B tests in email to make better and smarter Facebook ads.
Yes.
You can use A/B tested Facebook ads to make better and smarter email. It doesn't have to be like this. I mean, you
that's
can use
only going
those
to happen
lessons.
if those two teams
That's
start
right.
to talk,
That's
and
right.
that doesn't require the CMO
No.
to tell them to do that.
But look at the things that you just touched on. Those are classic direct marketing
Of course.
fundamentals, which unfortunately today's student of marketing at most major universities, my opinion, are not being taught the fundamentals of direct, and I guarantee you they are not being taught the fundamentals of digital.
So let me end and punctuate that conversation. The next one, I want to dig in on really one of the big concepts in the book, and that is that our advertising, our paid media shouldn't just be selling, it should be also helping us build those direct audiences.
Good.
So we'll put a pin in it and catch us in our next segment as we talk about that link between advertising and proprietary audiences.